Okay, so
Welcome.
I don't know how you want to structure it, or if you want to structure it at all, or
Well, we'll just
whatever.
we just started. Let me go and introduce, and we'll just have a conversation. This is Trey Jadlow,
Absolutely.
everyone. I'm here on this sixth day of April 2023. I'm here with friend Patrick, um, and he was kind of talking at the beginning there. I usually am very spontaneous with the way I do these things, so we haven't talked at all. But I guess we've had interaction in the past on Facebook, and that Patrick, I apologize, I don't really remember very much about our interaction, but you contacted me a few days ago and asked me if I'd be willing to just to get on and chat with you about religion, and I said sure. So I set this thing up. So welcome and thank you for joining me.
Excellent. Thanks. Yeah. No, really, that's absolutely accurate. That it was me who approached you, and it's because I remembered in the past. So yeah, we discussed on Facebook uh, about religion in general and Christianity and stuff. Um, and yeah, you often actually invited me to do it, but I was not ready at the time. But I'm ready now. So yeah, glad to be doing it.
Okay, great. Now, would you mind telling me a little about yourself? I mean, I from what I looked at, I think we talked a little bit about religion in our past conversations, but also I think that you have a propensity toward atheism. Is that correct?
Yes, I am an atheist, actually. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Would you mind telling me a little bit about yourself, and I'll tell you about myself, but just like maybe your religious background or any information about you. You're Canadian, right?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Would you mind just giving me a little biographical sketch of you, and I'll tell you about myself?
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah. So I mean, I do have a religious background. I was actually raised Catholic, Roman
Okay.
Catholic, um, in quite a pious family, actually.
Okay.
So like I mean, really pious. Like, there was a period where when I was like, I don't know, between the ages of, say, gosh, it's a long time ago now, but let's say, I don't know, between like 8 and I guess 14 years old. Like, we were going to Latin masses every morning before school, serving mass, this, that, like almost every day. So that's not why I left, though. I mean, I do think it was a little excessive now, looking back on it, but I mean, that's not the reason I lost my faith in the end. Anyways, and I stayed. So then in my high school years, so like around 17, that's when I first started having doubts. So the kind of doubt that a Protestant would have, like about transubstantiation and things like that.
Okay.
And then I just started thinking about the whole thing in general. And I guess by age 20, I would qualify myself at that point as like a Christian agnostic.
Okay.
So I was still Catholic and everything, still practicing and all that, but just a little less and with some doubts. But I was still fairly convinced, though. Like, I mean, I still believed in everything and all that, in the main stuff, like, or almost all the main stuff. Um, and and then at around age 27, I actually didn't know about them before then. So I'm 29 years old now. So that was like, I'm almost 30, actually. So that was about 3 years ago, I guess, or 2.5 years ago. I discovered the New Atheists, or
Okay.
the so-called New Atheists. So
And what venue was that? Where would
sorry, what
you
venue?
venue? Like what was this like on social media
Yes, on
or?
internet, on YouTube in particular. Just started watching debates of theirs, and
Okay.
watching talks given by Hitchens and stuff. Hitchens was a fan favorite of mine at the beginning.
I like Hitchens. He's my favorite
Yeah,
New Atheist.
yeah. I think even though he's been dead for, like, I don't know, since 2008 or something, he's still not short of fans on both sides.
Oh no, he's a master rhetorician. He wasn't very
Absolutely.
smart with his argumentation, but his
Yeah,
on metaphysics. But his
yeah.
I used to marvel at his ability to. Um, I enjoyed the fact that he would beat up people that don't really believe their own religion. He would expose it, and
Yeah,
quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, and he actually didn't go very easy on like very lightly on reluctant atheists too. Like I remember this one conversation he had where he was saying, "I'm trying to popularize the word anti-theist. You know, like I really don't believe it, and I don't want anyone else to believe it either." And even for me, that was a little bit excessive, but yeah. So anyway, he was a fan favorite when I first started discovering them. And I actually started out on Unbelievable at about this time as well, the group.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you were there at the time. I think you were.
Oh, you're talking about the Facebook group.
Right, exactly.
I left, because I left like a long time ago. I was there for a long time.
Yeah.
So
well, we did interact there. So you were.
Oh, we did. Okay.
At some point. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So yeah, and I've watched a lot of the show though too. Unbelievable. I really enjoy it. So anyway, yeah, but then ultimately my favorite became Sam Harris after that, because I thought he was a little bit more rigorous.
I think he's the worst.
He came off to me at the time as a little bit more
horrible.
rigorous. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying at the time. I don't think any of the four of them are really very rigorous yet.
No,
it's a lot of rhetoric. Yeah, so I would agree with that. Like Hitchens was the master, mostly because of his humor and his wit and stuff.
Yeah,
like
he was a rhetoric. Yeah, he could.
Yeah. But when it came down to arguing,
not saying they're stupid people, but when it comes to metaphysics and religion, all of them were abysmally embarrassing in my opinion. But they were. I mean, like Sam Harris is a very smart guy, but when it comes to these, like the moral landscape, I renamed the petitio principii fallacy, which is a begging the question fallacy, the Sam Harris fallacy. It's such a stupid book. Not that nobody can buy the book. I can't believe he found somebody to publish it. It's just so stupid. And I haven't read it, but I heard him give several lectures on it. And it's just, the whole premise, he basically assumes the very thing he says he sets out to prove, which is basically moral code. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but I can't stop.
We can talk about that later, like if we come to the moral argument or whatever. Because I mean, but at the end of the day, Harris actually, when it comes to ethics and morality, he's actually said many times that for him, you know, he calls it the bootstraps intuition. So at the end of the day, he doesn't really start off with fact. He starts off with essentially a feeling that he has. That you know, he
assumes moral code, and then just says then science can tell us how to prove it. No, he assumes moral code, and yes, obviously everybody can. Nothing he said was innovative whatsoever, but he just the fact that he was a charlatan and tried to make an old argument sound like something clever, in my view.
Yeah, it's actually really, really old. It's actually Aristotelian ethics, really. I mean, eudaimonia and all that. So yeah, he was kind of building on that, and kind of rebranding it with a kind of scientistic twist, if I can say it like that. Anyway, so I had my New Atheist period. I haven't watched New Atheists for a while now, except a little bit of Dawkins just recently, because he's been on with Piers Morgan and stuff, so a little bit. But
boy, that was embarrassing. I just saw a clip on that the other day when he started talking about Islam, and boy, did he get scared.
Oh, was that with Piers Morgan? You should send me the link after. I'll check it out.
I'll try to. It's a recent one that he did.
Yeah.
Those guys are such cowards. I thought it was so embarrassing. He said, basically, Dawkins says, "Don't ask me those questions. I'm not going to talk about Islam," because he's afraid. He won't say anything about it.
He used to, and they've struck fear in him. But where he doesn't back down is about gender and stuff, and I was actually kind of surprised about that. And by the way, just for the record, like I agree with Christians on almost all of that stuff.
Okay.
Like even abortion and stuff. Like I'm pretty intolerant of that. So, and Hitchens was actually too. Actually, I was surprised, but he actually wasn't really pro-choice either. Anyway, so so at around 27, that's when I lost the faith. Then I reconverted for a brief period. It was literally like a summer, 1 year, and then I deconverted again, and I've just remained an atheist since then. But there has been an evolution though in my atheism, because at the beginning, I was like a really kind of hardcore new atheist, kind of angry style, like you find a lot on the
Sure.
internet. And I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed to think about it now.
Well, when you discover something new, you're zealous about it. That's
Yeah,
okay.
right.
Same thing with with my faith. A lot of ways I'm like that.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. It's kind of, I guess, the same on both sides of the spectrum. But
Mhm.
so yeah, and then I calmed down, and all things said and done, I'm at the point where just trying to find the right way to phrase it. Like, I am confident in my atheism, but I'm not overly confident either. Like, I'm very, very open-minded about this stuff. And honestly, like, it could be just one argument or one piece of data that could completely change my mind. Like, it's almost, like, I don't know, like the Shroud of Turin or something. Like, if I were to really be convinced by that, I'd be a Christian again.
I can do a lot better than the Shroud of Turin.
Oh, well, good. Then I'm
I
looking
don't
forward
think
to
it's
it then.
authentic anyway.
Yeah, great. Then I'm looking forward to it then. I don't know. It was just an example off the top of my head.
Sure.
Hypothetical. So yeah. So I'm a confident atheist, but I'm not. I'm not closed to religion at all. Like I could have been in my first stage of it, like of deconversion, we'll say.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's me, I guess.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. It was helpful to get some context on.
Oh, and just one more thing. Sorry. I do genuinely think that both sides have a case, like Christians and atheists, or like theists and atheists in general. I think both sides have a case. I'm not convinced by the theistic case at this point, but I do think there's a case, even on the basis of science and stuff.
Yeah, so. But you do believe in a law of non-contradiction, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We both can't be right?
Oh, no. We can't both be right. I'm just saying, I think both sides have a case. Which one is correct in the end is another question.
Okay, well, I mean, you want to be strict about it. Only one side has a case then.
Well,
I mean, you can say you have things you appreciate on both sides, I guess.
Well, what I mean is that there are lines of argument on both sides that I find compelling. It's just that on the theistic side, it's not compelling enough to convince me to be a theist. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that helps. Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm I don't know what you know about me, but I live in Kansas City in the United States, right smack dab in the middle of the country. I'm 56. I've been a Christian 36 years. I was born again, became a Christian when I was 20 years old. I had kind of a religious background growing up.
Your beard reminds me of Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, it's getting a little scraggly. I might want to probably trim it here pretty soon, but I'll just see how long I can grow it. So when I was 20, I became a Christian, and then I met my wife about that time and got married and had kids. Sadly, I'm divorced. My wife left me about 10 years ago.
Oh gosh, I am so sorry to hear that. All my biggest sympathies, man. Like divorce is a real plight on our society. Yeah. I find all my sympathy goes to you, man. Sorry to hear that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. But life is good. I mean, I'm just it's hard and difficult, but God's grace has been unbelievable to me. But so I've got 6 kids. Their ages 33 down to 20. Let's see. Yeah, he just turned 20. 3 boys, 3 girls. So other than, I mean, I've been this area for my whole life. And when I became a Christian, I went down to a Christian missions organization. That's where I became a Christian, down in Northwest Arkansas for 4 years. That's where I met my wife when we came back up here. So other than that 4 years, I've lived here my entire life. In fact, my mother lives, which is the house I grew up in, probably a mile and a half south of me. I mean, I'm almost like the same neighborhood I grew up in now. But I'm a dental lab technician. That's what you see in the background here. I'm self-employed, so I work alone. I make crown and bridge work for dentists. And I really enjoy thinking about things. I enjoy thinking about metaphysics and issues of ultimacy, like origins and meaning and morality, destiny, all these things that are the big questions that people have. I find it fascinating. So most people want to know how, but my big question that fascinates me is the why. And usually then when I interact, it's going to be along those lines. And I
That's excellent,
enjoy.
'cause I'm the same. Like,
Okay.
I totally enjoy thinking about those things too. And for me, it's the same. I'm not so interested in the how, actually. I'm not
Yeah.
a huge fan of science per se. What interests me more is the why. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And that's just it fascinates me. So I like to think abstractly about things, and so I like interaction. I'm very sharp on the internet with text. I'm almost it's kind of like a game to me. And some people bring that back out. Yeah, you're not serious, Jadlow. You just want to. No, I mean, it's just fun. I have a very dry sense of humor, and I like to joke around on when I'm interacting. Like right now, like I can't find an atheist who will have a conversation anymore. They just don't exist. I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook anymore. They started censoring me for stupid things. I was doing nothing wrong, and I figured they're going to cancel me, so I just left. I'm there just for if something's really important or something, I might post or something on there, but I don't hang out there anymore, which I wish I could.
Really
I like
bad.
a lot.
It's really bad, the cancellation stuff. It's just
it's
a
terrible.
direct assault on free speech. I mean,
they basically threw me in jail for I quoted to some girl who's an atheist. I said, I have found that atheists are abysmally ignorant when it comes to the philosophical foundations of why they believe what they believe. I mean, embarrassingly bad. And like 9 months later, they threw me in jail for hate speech. I mean, in Facebook
that's
jail.
great. Yeah, it's
it's like what? Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And so sadly,
yeah. I mean, if I were to go say men are men and women are women, I'd probably get canceled too.
Well, that's a problem. So I'm on Twitter, and I left Twitter a couple of years ago, and boy, they kicked my. I mean, I lost my account, I guess, right away. So I came back because Elon bought it, because I was hopeful that there'd be free speech restored there.
Didn't last long.
What's that?
Didn't last long. His
oh no
control.
It's great. I have no. There's nothing I'm afraid to talk about really. I've talked about controversial things, and I'm not a mean person. And I mean, but I think that I'm a fanatic for the First Amendment rights, that we need to allow people who say things that are politically incorrect. That's the only way we're going to progress. So I say
Voltaire being put in the Bastille prison because he wrote certain things about the king reminds me of that. And Voltaire was like that. He was a provocateur.
That's right. And he wasn't an anti-theist. I mean, he was an anti-organized religion.
Actually, so.
Yeah. So I think it's imperative that we have the ability, like, for example, I need to be able to have the freedom to reason with people about my faith. And that includes things like talking about homosexuality. Right. And those things are like off the table now. And I don't want to have the right to be mean to people. I want to have the right to be able to speak to people, to reason with them about my moral code. That's the glorious thing about America, in my opinion, is this doctrine of the separation of church and state. And the way it's understood in modern iterations is not the way it is historically at all. The right says that it doesn't exist. They said that basically people made it up and imposed it upon the First Amendment. And the left says that it is a fundamental part of our country and our Constitution, but what it means is that Christians are not allowed to be engaged in discourse with their belief system. And neither one of those is correct. I don't want to go into a long discourse about where it came from, but it basically, the doctrine of separation of church and state was invented. Now, I want to say invented, I'm just saying codified to be a better way to say it, because I think it's biblical. It was codified by Roger Williams, who is the founder of the First Baptist Church in America. And he was heavily persecuted. And anyway, the glory of the American experiment that nobody else has is that nobody is ever forced to believe. But like I said, we've got to have that liberty to be able to say whatever we want in the First Amendment and not be politically correct in everything that we say, so that we can reason with each other and we can. I became a Christian because I thought it was compelling, reasonably. I don't want anybody to come to believe what I say simply because I say it, or on some kind of authority that I say that I am subjected to, that I cannot demonstrate. And that's what I think cults are made of, and that's what makes me very nervous. There's a lot of Christians today that are really big into this. Are you familiar with presuppositionalism?
Yes, I've read about it. So essentially, you presuppose the doctrines and then you set out to prove them. Is that it? Like, you assume that
Well,
and then
it's the existence of God. You cannot have any true knowledge unless you presuppose the God who is the foundation for all knowledge. And it's the logic is fine. It's Anselmian argumentation. It's called a priori argumentation. The problem is that Van Til, the guy that came up with it, takes it a step further, and he basically says, you've got to accept the Christian God and the Bible as the Word of God as a foundation in order to have any knowledge. And it's a petitio principii fallacy. You're begging the question. You're assuming your very conclusion. That's what Sam Harris does with his science argument, with morality. You're assuming the very thing you're seeking to prove. And the problem that it comes down to is it basically says, believe me, on an epistemological level, on me talking to you, if I'm a presuppositionalist, I'm essentially saying, believe me because I say so. And that's a very dangerous thing. That's what cults are made of. I always say that's what airplanes into buildings are about, and Kool-Aid in Guyana. And it's very important, though, that if I'm going to tell you that my perspective is correct, I need to give justification for it, and I need to do so in a compelling way that cannot be refuted. And that's how I start my whole thing. I don't know. I'm a really simple guy. My argumentation is very simple. I mean, you said you've not found compelling arguments. Well, you found compelling arguments, but not super compelling.
Not enough. Not enough. Yeah. Yeah,
and I've been doing this now 13, 14 years. And I've not only have I never lost this argument, I've never had a serious challenge by anybody. And I'm basically using cosmological argumentation. It's the argument from contingency. And I have never, like I said, not only have I never lost, and it's not that I'm smart or anything like that. It's just the argument itself is that compelling. But it's never been challenged, and maybe you're the guy that can do it. But the thing is we have been overwhelmed. The church has, and philosophy overall, since the Enlightenment, with anti-metaphysical paradigm, which is transcendental idealism from Immanuel Kant. Are you familiar with Kant?
Somewhat, yeah. I find it very abstruse, but what he wrote. But yeah.
Yeah, and he basically, I can simplify it for you. He basically said, let me start with Descartes. René Descartes comes along, and there's wanting to know what he can know for certainty, because you see the breakup of the Roman Catholic Church with the Protestant Reformation, and it caused a lot of upheaval. People like saying, well, what do we believe now? We used to be able to ask the church, and now there's nobody there, with sola scriptura and stuff, and other things that caused a great deal of upheaval of certainty. And so Descartes comes along in the 17th century and basically says, I want to know what is indubitable, what cannot be doubted. Okay, and then you're familiar with cogito ergo sum, right?
Yeah, and he starts to want to restructure the world based on math and whatnot, because math to him is extremely certain and satisfying intellectually. Yeah,
and it is. But he basically says that the only thing that we can know for sure, though, is in here. Okay, inside of here is reality. So we see a shift at that time that goes from objective reality outside, being the real realness, to the only real realness we can know is inside our minds. And so we move from ontology to epistemology, philosophically speaking. And so after him then comes David Hume, who basically is an empiricist, because Descartes is a rationalist. Hume is an empiricist, and he basically said, well, our senses always trick us, and we cannot really see causal relationships. We just assume it, which he was right. He says, when you see rain falling, you see the ground get wet, we don't know for sure that the rain caused the ground to get wet. There could be some mediating force in there that we don't see. Or when he talked about the cue ball hitting the object ball, with the billiards. And he said,
although you could take the example of the archer, there you can clearly see the archer and the bow and arrow, and then the arrow. Right.
No, you don't know that there's some intervening force, though, that is mediating that. There's causality. You can't see it. You can't see causality. He says we can observe relationships of contiguity. He said, in other words, we know that when this happened, when you shoot the arrow, it hits the target. We know that it flies through the air. You can say these things and you see them, but we don't know for sure that there's some intervening element that we don't understand, the causal relationship, which is the foundation for all of science. And he said you cannot know it for sure, and he was right. And so what that does is causes massive skepticism. It's going to destroy theology. It's going to destroy science because and Kant comes along and hears this, and he said Hume woke him from his dogmatic slumber. In other words, it challenged him, said, we've got to come up with something to save the phenomena of existence. In other words, it's going to ruin society if we lose hope in science, basically, and the causal relationships. Now, Hume didn't say there is no causal relationship. He's just saying we can't know it. We can't say that we really understand it because our senses, again, they trick us. Like Augustine likes to use the example of the bent oar. When you put the oar in the water, it bends. Was it really bending? No, it's an illusion. And we have these illusions all the time. That's why science is always changing, because our senses are not absolutely certain.
Of course, there is repetitive experience, though.
Absolutely.
To me, would be like kind of an antidote to that kind of skepticism.
But it's not absolute. That's the thing.
What do you mean by absolute? What do you mean by absolute? Do you mean about everything? Or
yeah, we don't have absolute knowledge about anything as contingent creatures. You just assume things. We assume things at our beginning. We assume, and this is what I do when I have my conversations. I ask, and I'll ask you this: will you grant me that if we're going to inquire about anything, we got to have the law of non-contradiction or the laws of thought?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by the laws of thought, but yeah, the law of non-contradiction.
Law of non-contradiction, law of identity, law of excluded middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, those are the basics. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the tool for which we can filter the information. And secondly, we've got to have the basic reliability of sense perception. In other words,
absolutely,
not that it's perfect, but just that we can have some knowledge. Otherwise, we have
basic
no connection
reliability
to the world, right?
of sense perception. Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those are the two things that I asked for, and we've got to have those things. And if we don't have them, then we have no inquiry whatsoever. But let me finish up with Kant, though. So Kant comes along and he basically says he's silent for like 10 years because he's just thinking about how to remedy this problem of Hume, and he comes up with a new epistemology. And what he does is he takes from rationalism and empiricism, and he comes up with a new paradigm for understanding. And most philosophers, they'll say Kant is the watershed of philosophy. And whenever I talk to skeptical philosophers, they're abysmally ignorant on anything before Kant. All they've been taught is post-Kant, what he says. And what Kant basically said is, he said, if we're going to have any true knowledge, he didn't even say we can't have true knowledge, because he said, we don't know for sure. But he said, if we're to have true knowledge, we've got to at least have sense perception. And so what he does is, he said, knowledge begins with our senses. And then he said, we have the categories of the mind. And he said, we got space-time, which is like the container for us to have any experience. And so what he does is he puts all these things together, and it's called Kant's sausage grinder of epistemology. That which comes out, we say is truth, but he doesn't even say it is truth. He said it's a judgment. Again, everything is in here. We don't know for sure that everything in here corresponds with what we see outside, but we hope it does. We assume it does, but we can't know for sure. So the only truth is what's in here, and it's our judgment of what we experience outside. But wait a minute, I had a point there. So what he said is, he basically said there are two realms. There are certain things that you can't experience with your senses, but you'd think they must be true, which would be the self, our soul. You can't go to the doctor and say, hey, doctor, how's my soul doing? He can't look at it with a stethoscope. And then secondly, he said the essence of things, which is still true today. We don't know what the essence of things. You can look at a tomato and you can look at it under a microscope, and then you can peel the onion back, as it were, as you go down, and you can look at the atomic level, then you can look at the subatomic level, and we still never get to the actual essence of a thing. So the soul, or the self, the essence of things, and then thirdly was God. We can't experience God with our senses. Therefore, he is in this realm called the noumenal realm. Those three categories are in what he called the noumenal realm, and the realm that we can experience is called the phenomenal realm, which is that which can be experienced with the senses. Now, he said both of these realms.
You said God, the soul, and what's the other thing?
The essence of things.
Okay, so the soul is for
like
people.
tomato-ness. What's that?
Okay, the soul is for people, and then the essence is for everything else. Okay.
Yeah. The invisible whatness of something, what it is. You
Right.
can we see the accidental properties of tomato. Its redness and its its meatiness or whatever it is, but we don't see the actual ultimate reality of tomato.
So essentially, it's like the pile of sand paradox.
What do you mean?
Well, like there's a paradox. I think it's from ancient Greece where essentially you have this pile of sand, and so the guy talking about the paradox says, so that's a pile of sand, but if I start taking a couple grains off, is it still a pile? And then
right, how far?
And then there comes a point where you don't know if it's a pile anymore, and you don't know how many grains of sand you need to call it a pile.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me,
well, that's a distinction. No, that's not an ontological distinction. I mean, that's a categorizational poser there. But what I'm talking about is,
I suppose what I was saying is that I guess to me, like when you say you can't really define tomato-ness, so to speak, like the intrinsic nature of a tomato,
mm-hmm.
Or tomato, I don't know. That one will never end. I guess to me, I think of the pile of sand because I'm like, if you wanted to define a tomato, I'll go with tomato. I guess to me, it's like, how many grains of sand do you need for a pile of sand? How much?
Yeah, but you're talking quantity. I'm talking quality.
How much of the red veggie do you need to call it a tomato? I guess. So.
Yeah, but it's a whatness question, not an how much. It's a quality rather.
How much do you need of each of those things to get to what the whatness is?
Well, you've got to have. Well, I guess there could be some correlation there because you've got to have certain properties that are related to tomato-ness.
Right.
Some of those are going to be accidental properties, and others are going to be essential properties, to use Aristotelian terms. So, for example, I have the substantial form of humanity, and if you cut off my arm, I'm still me. It's the argument Tom of the sand. But at some point, you're going to maybe cut off my head, then I'm going to lose my whatness. At least in a vivacious sense, as a soul being alive in
I've actually thought about that one, and to me, you're a human being if you have two things. One, if you're living, whatever that is, and two, you can have all your limbs and certain other things removed, but as long as the trunk is there, so the torso area and the head, then you're still a person to me, like still a human being is what I mean. Because
you're alive,
right? Essentially.
But what if they were able to just keep your brain alive in a vat? Would you be a human then?
I know that's a paradox too. Yeah, not sure about that. Honestly, I'd say no. I'd say no, you're not a human being anymore, because I'd say that's essentially like a computer, but the computer can't.
No, but the brain, your consciousness is there. You are this. Aristotle would call it the formal principle. In other words, you still have the soul. And that's Christian perspective, but it's also Greek. Aristotelian.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I have to think about it a bit more. Yeah.
Anyway, that's a side note. But anyway, so Kant comes up with this idea. Basically, says that he was a theist. And he wasn't trying to, dog on Christianity. He was a German pietist background, and he was a mystic somewhat. But he wasn't. He was trying to return. I think he thought religion had gotten too rational, and so he's trying to protect it from reason in a sense as well. But he was also saying that God must exist because there would be no right and wrong. It's a presuppositional argument, basically. That the presuppositionalists use Kant's argument. Have you ever heard of the tag argument?
No.
It's called the transcendental argument for God. And it basically says, if we're going to have reason, there must be a reasoner, basically.
It's Anselm, right? Isn't it Anselm?
It is? Well, yes. It is. It's an a priori argumentation.
Yeah, the ontological.
It is an ontological argument. Yeah. But it's funny, the presuppositionalists literally use the same term as Kant. And I always tease my presuppositional friends that they are disciples of Kant and they don't realize it. And what Kant basically said is, he said you cannot um, you cannot experience God. You have to assume that he exists, because there would be no order, no moral order. Basically, he wrote that in the Critique of Pure Practical Reason, after he wrote the Critique of Pure Reason, and he basically said, R.C. Sproul is a guy that I follow all the time who helped me with this stuff. He said that Kant wrote around 1789, I think he wrote Critique of Pure Reason, and he basically kicked God out the front door on that one, said, well, you can't really experience him, so you can't really prove that he exists. And then he ran around to the side door and let him in through the kitchen with his Critique of Practical Reason. In other words, he says, if there is no God, then there will be no right and wrong. There will be no reason for living. So therefore, we must assume that he exists. He believed in God, but he just said you couldn't prove him. And what's happened since Immanuel Kant, basically almost everyone fell dead at his feet, both in philosophy and in the religion. And what they basically said is metaphysics is off the table. We're not allowed to do metaphysics. And so the Christians basically said, that's fine. We will just entrench ourselves in our Bibles. And as long as we have our Bibles, we don't care. And what happened is basically Christianity had one of its wings clipped, in my opinion. And presuppositionalists are a wonderful example of this. They hate natural theology, which is metaphysics. And what it has done is it made the Christian church stupid. Now, the Roman Catholics didn't fall for this under metaphysics. In fact, when I study metaphysics, oftentimes I'll read Roman Catholics because they never wavered on this. But Protestants did. They completely lost it. We're having a ressourcement right now within our movement, both in I don't know if you noticed, but there's atheists that are actually respecting philosophy now. They used to think it was stupid, again, because they were told by Kant they can't do metaphysics. And Kant was just wrong. He was just flat out wrong. And people are starting to realize that now. So for 300 years, we've been in kind of a darkness. And this is why Christianity, in my opinion, is the tail and not the head. We used to be the head of everything. And it is because we gave up the discipline of metaphysics and have fallen into a malaise of fideism, which is what presuppositionalism is. And it has marginalized Christianity from the marketplace of ideas. They basically said, well, if you just, presuppositionalists basically say, you got to start with my conclusion before we can have a conversation. And everybody says, I don't have a conversation. Just keep your religion in your walls of your church and we're fine. They said, okay. And they went and basically became irrelevant. Yeah. But now we're resourcing this and we're coming back to an opportunity to be able to think deeply about these things, not just by reading scripture, but through contemplation. Because, I don't know if you know that Augustine popularized or synthesized Platonic thought with Christianity. He was a Neoplatonist before he's a Christian. And Aquinas, synthesized Aristotelian thought with Christianity. Yeah. And historically speaking, the church did not hate philosophy. They saw it as a handmaiden to the queen of the sciences, theology. But we're living in a day right now that says philosophy is evil. You should not have anything to do with that. Just give me my Bible, and it has made us very, let me see, I don't want to say foolish, but very inept to think about things deeply. And so what we're doing is we're capturing that now. And
so it's a
very exciting time.
What is your denomination?
I'm a Reformed Baptist. So I'm a Calvinistic Baptist guy. I follow a confession of 1689. In 1689, there was a confession written called the Second London Baptist Confession of Faith. And that's it's a Reformed Baptist that are actually on the forefront of recapturing this. I'm sorry?
It's not the New Westminster? I thought I heard you say once when you were debating a Catholic about the issue of justification. I thought I heard you say it was the New Westminster Creed, but maybe I'm wrong.
There's a Westminster Confession of Faith. That's the Presbyterians. Ours is, we basically sniped off of theirs.
Okay.
And the Westminster is 1647. The oh my goodness, what's the name of it? The Congregationalists. I'm blanking out the name of it. The 1658 made a confession, and then ours came in 1689. Basically, it's kind of a morphing of those three.
In the U.S. or in Britain?
In Great Britain is where they were all written. But anyway, so I like thinking about things metaphysically, and I don't think that it's bad the enemy of God. And I'm a big fan of natural revelation. Now, natural revelation cannot give you salvation, but it can tell you true things about God, which everybody knows. In Romans 1, it says everybody knows there's a God because they look at creation. They know that they know that they're not self-existent. And then they look at Romans chapter 2. We all know there's a moral code that we should be following. And if there's no moral lawgiver, there is no moral code. So by modus ponens, there must be a moral lawgiver if there's such a thing as a moral law. But with that being said,
I'm going to use the laconic phrase, if.
If you don't disagree with me, do you?
If morality is a code as such, right? Like if it's a set of laws that would require a lawgiver. No, I don't I'm not a relativist. I spurn moral relativism. Just so
okay. I don't want to go there first. That's I've only got two arguments basically.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Let's start with the ontological argument. Okay. Well, it's not an ontology. It's an argument from ontology. No, it's okay. I mean, that's a good argument, but I basically use the argument from contingency.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear that one. I'm not sure I've heard it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you have. It's a cosmological argument, but it's basically Thomas's 5 ways. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with those, right?
Aquinas, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are not 5. Okay, those are not 5 evidences. Those are 5 proofs. Do you know the difference between a proof and an evidence?
Absolutely, yeah. Evidence is something that is used to support a claim and or a conclusion, and proof is like irrefutable, logical demonstration. Right.
It's going to be illogical. It's going to be deductive, and evidences are kind of more inductive. And so Aquinas was giving proofs, but because of the Enlightenment, Aquinas had gotten forgotten. There's a ressourcement as well in my denominational orientation with Thomas Aquinas, and it's a big battle right now.
The Enlightenment. Oh man, the Enlightenment. Gosh, I hate that word.
It's the endarkenment, in my opinion.
Yeah,
there were some good things.
I agree.
I think there were some good things, like toleration.
Yeah, no, like toleration things for sure, but there were a few good things. Although when you start to get to know them, actually, they weren't necessarily all that tolerant. It depends on what. But
that's right.
Yeah,
disagreeers got the guillotine.
Right. No, and I mean some comments that Voltaire or people like that would make about Black people or whatever, like they were pretty bigoted in their own way.
Oh yeah, of course.
So and even right into guys like Darwin and stuff too. So anyway, I was just gonna say, like, it's so annoying, right, to me, because you have this whole history of thought that comes in between essentially the 5th century CE or AD, if you will, and I don't know, the late 15th century, I guess. And or somebody like what was his name, the Italian poet there who coined the term Dark Ages, and the Enlightenment essentially just said it was all dumb and all useless, on the basis of just some kind of, I don't know, anti-Catholic rhetoric or something, and it's just so stupid. It's just so false. I mean, like, clearly Aquinas knew how to think, and Anselm or whatever, or William of Ockham or whatever. I mean, these are big names, and rightfully so. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's one of the things. That's one of the reasons why we're so stupid as a society, I think, now, because we have divorced ourselves from serious thinking about history. Not that nobody cares about history, but it has not taken such a significant place. And I think the Enlightenment was one of those things that sowed the seed for the ignorance, because
guys like Gibbon and whatnot, man, honestly.
I mean, the Renaissance. What do you remember? What the maxim was for the Renaissance?
Yeah,
ad fontes, to the sources. It was returning back to the old ways, and I think that's what we're having right now. I think we're having a mini Renaissance right now. This is very exciting and encouraging, and hopefully can free us from our ways.
For me, unfortunately, especially new atheists and whatnot, but even some Christians, I think too, are still in a 500, what is essentially 500 or more year old propaganda at this point, that you can ultimately trace back to, I keep forgetting his name, that Italian poet there in the 14th century who said it was an age of doom and gloom or whatever. Really, really dumb. But like that statement anyway. And I feel like we just can't shake it. It's so annoying. And yet there's so many historians that keep debunking so many myths, right, about essentially, what we call today the Middle Ages, even though even that's very loaded. But it's just so annoying.
Yep. Okay, so let me move on with the argument then. And basically, so since you've given me the groundwork, the epistemological tools we have, which are law of non-contradiction and sense perception, I'm going to say that if something exists, there are only 4 possibilities to explain that existence. And number 1 is that it's an illusion. Everything is an illusion. Number 2, that which exists is self-created. Number 3, that which exists is self-existent. And number 4, that which exists is created by something that is self-existent. And so I'll go through each one of those and demonstrate their viability.
When you say self-existent, what do you mean by that?
Not dependent on anything else to be.
Oh, okay.
It would be uncaused, yes. Anything that is caused is an effect, right? And is dependent by definition.
So something
anything
like,
that, well,
so something
we'll
like a kind of spirit or something that doesn't need any external entities to keep it in existence. Am I paraphrasing that correctly or rephrasing?
Right. And it cannot be acted upon. It's non-contingent.
Okay.
All right. So let's go with the first one now, and we'll get into that. The first one says
I'm just going to say one thing before we keep going. Sometimes I turn my sound off. It's just so that there's no interference, but I'm not gone or anything. I'm just listening. So go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's fine. All right. So the first one is that which exists is an illusion. And we've already gone over this. We know that everything is not an illusion because you've got to ask the question, who's asking the question? So, Descartes, cogito ergo sum, in order to doubt, you got to think. In order to think, you got to have a thinker. And so therefore, since there's a thinker, there is something existing. So for my argument that I'm making here, I don't even need you to be in existence. I could be a brain in a vat. I don't care. That doesn't even affect me, actually. All I need to do for this argument is to have an inquirer. And we know that the inquirer exists because he's asking the question. Sometimes an atheist will say something like, yeah, everything's illusion. I say, well, who said that? There's got to be something. If you're going to be having any inquiry whatsoever, you got to have, everything can't be an illusion. It is possible that you are an illusion and that I'm having a dream right now. But the one thing that I can't question is the fact that I am questioning my existence. All right. So everything is not an illusion, according to that maxim. So number 1 is off. Number 2, that which exists is self-created. Can you tell me what you think the problem with that argument might be?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really seems pretty absurd to me because, like, for creation to happen, you have to have one thing making another thing, right? So you can't do that to yourself because then you'd be uncreated anyway. So at least by that thing, yeah. So it's
that's
really
why I asked for the law of non.
Yeah.
Why I asked for the law of non-contradiction at the beginning for this one right here.
Right.
You would have to be and not be at the same time in the same relationship in order to make yourself. And so it's illogical. It's irrational.
Impossible.
Right. Yeah. So it's logically impossible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now the third option is that which exists is self-existent. In other words, it's something that in and of itself is, but is not contingent upon anything else. And the problem with that is that anything that changes is an effect by definition, and it is not self-existent. And so I ask you, you're the inquirer, or I'm the inquirer. I'm the only one in this that's making this inquiry into reality. Is it true that we are not self-existent?
So you mean we as people, like we people.
Self-existent is not subject to time. It's not subject to change. It doesn't need air. It doesn't need food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's not us. I mean, we're dependent on.
We are contingent. We are an effect. Okay, and so the argument goes along. Are you familiar with the modus ponens argument?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if A implies B and A is assumed or granted, then B necessarily follows. All right, if an effect is, then it must necessarily have a cause, because it could not affect itself before it was. So there must be two types of being in the universe. And we do know for a fact, because we just demonstrated, that the effect exists. So that gives us the final opportunity, or a lost final option, to say that that which exists is created by something that is self-existent.
Okay, so how do you get from the fact that we are not self-existent because we're contingent to the fact that we have to be created by something that is self-existent?
Did you create yourself?
Oh no, absolutely not. But
If
no.
the entire universe is dependent being, then it's dependent being independently, which is a violation of law of identity.
Okay. Okay. So, because like for me, I think it's pretty clear from what we know of reality in general, at least natural reality, that you can have a whole bunch of things that are contingent, but they're not necessarily contingent on something that's self-existent. Like, okay, so we have parents, grandparents, etc. None of those people were self-existent either.
Right.
Right. So clear. So there is room for that too. Now, so I'm struggling with how you get from we're not self-existent to we, because of that, we had to have been, shall we say, spawned by something that is self-existent.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get from A to B? If
Well,
you're
imagine the entire universe is a large Venn circle, okay?
Yeah.
And everything within that circle is dependent, which is what you're positing. It would need to be dependent independently because there's nothing else. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, I'm struggling to understand what it is that you're saying that I'm saying. So just rephrase that so that I can understand what you're saying.
You cannot have dependent existence instantiating independently by definition and ontologically, because it cannot create itself.
Okay.
You can't have all matter be, you can't have contingent being without necessary being, is another way of saying it.
Okay. Oh yeah, necessary for that thing, for that being's, for the contingent being's existence, yeah. But
Yeah.
does that, yeah, okay, good. So I'm interested in going back to what you said about the universe being a circle and everything being contingent in the circle.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you trying to get at with that? Like, do you think that I mean that somehow there's infinite contingency going on in the circle, or because
Well, that's what you're positing. You're positing all being is contingent being. Well, that's not possible.
So actually, I'm not. Actually, I'm not.
So you're saying it's both self-existent and contingent at the same time in the same relationship?
No, not that either. What I'm saying is that, okay, what a lot of theists will say God is to explain contingency, I think you can also say about other modes of being. So God is a mode of being for theists. God is like this.
No, he's not a mode of being. No,
well,
that would be attributing what do you call it? Accidental properties to God. God is not a mode of being. God is being.
So God is this entity that exists eternally, and that is not subject to material laws. We'll put it that way. So that I think you agree with, and so do all theists, really. So
he's a creator of material laws.
Yeah, creator of, yeah. So for me, I don't see why that type of being is necessary. Number one, I don't see why there'd only be one. I don't see why there couldn't be many. So then you run into Occam's razor issues.
No. Well, I can explain that too.
I mean, you could, right? Because otherwise there wouldn't have been so many polytheists. But
no, that doesn't matter.
We'll leave that out.
Because people are wrong doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that either. But clearly there were a lot of polytheists that went down that road. So, okay. Anyway, that's
why Socrates had to drink the hemlock, because he was poking fun at the polytheist.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know, actually. I've never really known why he was forced to do that. I always thought it was more because of a crime.
He was corrupting the youth, and
right,
he
exactly.
was bringing up people to the society.
Right,
but he was poking fun. All those guys, Plato and Aristotle also believed in one that it's called classical theism is a modern term for it. And this is what Christians believe, that there is one simple ultimate reality that is the foundation for all that is good and all that really
Aristotle's
is.
prime mover, right? Yeah.
Yes, but Aristotle didn't believe he was personal, and he also believed in the eternality of prime matter, which is dualism, which is not compatible with Christianity. Thomas tried to synthesize it, but he failed.
Interesting. Yeah. So So anyway, that was an aside. So getting back to my line of reasoning about the relationship between self-existent, so in this case deity, and contingent beings. I don't see why it's necessary to have God in this case, right? Because that's what we're talking about. To have this sequence or this ensemble, shall we say, of contingent beings. To me, you can have another mode of being where you don't need that, but you have a whole sequence of contingent beings that result from whatever cause it is. I'm not saying that I know what the cause is, but I don't see why it couldn't be a material cause. I don't see why it couldn't be a material origin.
Well, matter changes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Energy changes, so it's not ultimate reality. Anything that changes is an effect by definition.
Maybe there is no such thing as ultimate reality. Right.
Okay. So what you're just basically saying, you don't know, and you're not going to concede the argument. And so you're just going to say, I don't know, even though you can't rebut the argument.
I think
you got to demonstrate the problem with my argument, my friend.
For me, the problem is that you're saying to have contingent beings, you need a self-existent cause. I don't see why you need a self-existent cause. I don't see why you can't have a cause that is not self-existent, but that is there.
Because that's option two.
That's spawnness.
Okay? It's not something cannot be self-created. You even conceded that.
I'm not saying it is. I'm like, okay, so for instance, I'm not a physicist, right? So I don't know if this theory.
We're talking metaphysics anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
For me, it's actually physics, but whatever.
Well, for me, wait a minute. The physical can't be the ultimate reality because it changes.
Like I've said, I've cast doubt already on there being such a thing as ultimate reality. Right? I'm not sure that there is such a thing.
Yeah, but you haven't demonstrated it. You just asserted it.
Well, okay, but I'm not setting out to disprove ultimate reality. I'm just saying I'm not sure that it exists. So, okay. So for me, you can have, so this would be a physical question for me, a question of physics. I don't see what the problem would be with a model of what I like to call a model of infinite succession of universes or infinite sequence of universes.
You've only compounded the problem to an infinity. The multiverse, the good old multiverse.
It's not a multiverse for me. It's not a multiverse because a multiverse is where you have several universes coexisting.
It's an infinite regress, right?
It's not for me. For me, it's like the symbol of the Trinity with the three circles.
Yes.
Do you have a problem with that symbol? Would you call that an infinite regress?
No, because God is. Okay. It's a distinction between being in person. You're a Catholic. You should know that.
Yeah, I'm not a Catholic anymore. But anyway, you don't have a problem with that. So essentially, it's comparable because what I'm saying is, I don't see why time has to be in contradiction with eternity, ultimately speaking. Like in the absolute, I don't see why.
Time had a beginning, according to Stephen Hawking at the Big Bang.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree. So, but
time is just a measurement of contingent matter changing. Would you agree with that?
No, not really. Not for me.
That's how we know time, right?
For me, time is just a succession of different states of being.
Right, change. It's a measurement of change.
Well, if you say so. But like for me, I'm not sure. Like a rock can just sit there and not change for quite a while.
It changes every moment of it's constantly changing. It's slow, but it's changing.
Well, maybe.
Entropy is affecting everything.
Maybe. Okay, fine. So we can grant that of infinite or the measurement of change or whatever. Fine. But so I don't see the problem with an infinite sequence of just, you don't even have to call it a universe. You could just call it, I don't know, existence. I don't know. Like an infinite sequence of various types of existence, and just call that ultimate reality, if you will.
So it's an infinite regress, effects without causes.
No, effects with causes, but not self-existent causes.
Are the causes that you're positing in this scenario all did they all start out as effects and then cause something else? Anything that changes is an effect by definition.
I would say so for most of it, yeah. But then I guess, with that kind of model, you would have certain things that would just be eternal. And I guess under your terminology, that would be kind of self-existent. But again, even if you're going to posit this thing about being self-existent, I don't see why it would have to be a spiritual entity, a god, an angel, whatever you want to call it. I don't see why you have to bring that in. And
okay, well, you grant then there must be two types of being at least?
Yeah, so this is where I was going to mention Graham Oppy's argument about Occam's razor and theism, because Graham Oppy used this argument. I can send you his paper after, where essentially he said for him, his most powerful argument, and he called it a positive argument in favor of atheism. So not only a defensive argument or an objection, but really a positive argument in favor of atheism. So his argument goes like this: all things being equal, this is Occam's razor, all things being equal, it's best to go with the more simple explanation.
Of course.
And it so happens that an explanation that excludes two types of existence, namely natural and supernatural, is simpler. And given we have access to natural explanations and we don't have access to supernatural explanations, it makes sense, all things being equal, to favor natural explanations.
Did you catch that?
And to exclude supernatural ones.
Yes.
So
what he did is he basically parrots Kant and then throws out Kant's positive argumentation. That's not even imaginative. That's such an easy argument to dispel. He's basically saying we're going to start out saying we can't know God, therefore since we can't know him, then Occam's razor said we should do away with him. But that's not what reality is. We know that contingent being cannot exist non-contingently, and that matter cannot be ultimate reality because matter changes. Therefore, it's a necessary corollary. That's such a stupid argument. These guys are supposed to be so smart.
But maybe ultimate reality does not exist, or if it does, it doesn't exist in the way you're saying it does.
Then you need to come up with a rebuttal to the argument. Don't just tell me there's some defeater to your argument. I don't know what it is, but we might find out someday. That's called a concession.
Okay, I'm not trying to disprove your argument. What I'm doing is I'm objecting to it by saying I don't think that, logically speaking, if you're going to do modus ponens, it has to be irrefutable. It has to be unescapable.
You've already granted that the A. You've granted that an effect is
granted A, not the conclusion. You've gone.
But you've granted that modus ponens is valid. If you grant A, then B necessarily follows.
Okay, you've gone from A, saying,
which is you, the inquirer,
right? Being so A is I'm contingent, you're contingent. We're all people. All people alive today are contingent.
Hence, all you need is you.
Okay, whatever me then. And given I'm contingent, you've gone from that to saying because I
can't exist non-contingently.
You're saying because I'm not self-existent and I can't create myself, therefore I had to have been created by a self-existent entity. But it doesn't follow. Logically, it doesn't follow.
How?
Because logically, you can have a model, because it's logically possible to have a model of infinite succession of either contingent or ever-changing entities. It's logically possible.
So that's number 2. You're saying that something can create itself before it exists.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that one thing leading to another, serendipity essentially, but just infinite. One thing leading to another. And you don't need...
But where did the one thing come from? Patrick, where did the one thing come from?
It's not one thing. It's
the original. Where did the original come from?
That's exactly
is it self-existent or is it contingent?
Okay, that's exactly the problem here, is that you're talking about an origin, and I'm saying there doesn't necessarily have to be an origin.
Yeah, well, you're just saying I don't want to look at it because it scares me.
No, it doesn't scare me at all. I'm saying, logically speaking...
Then why don't you concede the argument? You have not refuted the argument at all, my friend.
I've objected to it.
You've been utterly owned, and you're just trying to run away.
I sufficiently objected to it such that it's not compelling. I don't have to refute it, right?
You do have to refute it. I make a claim, you either refute it or concede. Don't tell me I don't know, and then somehow that wins.
False dichotomy. You can object.
What's the third way?
The third way is what I've done. You can object to it and weaken it sufficiently such that it is no longer compelling enough to be convincing, logically speaking. Yeah.
You've just given me an illogical refutation.
You either prove something or you argue in defense of it, but just because you argue in defense of something doesn't make it a proof.
Well, it is a proof. Yeah. Do you know that the principle of causality is analytically true? Did you know that?
Yeah,
it's like 2 + 2 is 4. It's an analytical argument.
Yeah.
Every effect must have a... Are you familiar with Bertrand Russell's complaint about Christianity?
Yeah, I've read some of what Russell wrote and whatnot. Yeah.
He basically misunderstood the principle of causality. Here, the great mathematician of Great Britain did not understand the principle of causality. He said that everything must have a cause. And if everything must have a cause, then why not God? Do you know what's wrong with that argument? The principle of causality doesn't say that everything must have a cause. It says every effect must have a cause, which is true. Because the only way you can define an effect is to invoke the reality of a cause. Okay. The only way you can define a cause is to invoke the concept of effect.
Okay, so
you can't have one without the other. It's illogical.
Okay, I think I see what you mean. This is why you say law of non-contradiction or identity or both.
Yeah,
you can't.
The law of causality is just an application of the law of non-contradiction.
Okay, so but we as contingent agents can actually see this is where I think Russell realized that logic is not perfect, because this is where
it makes me lose.
This is where we meet the bounds of logic to me, the limits of logic. So, well, you can laugh, but I mean, I honestly believe that I have come to the same conclusion as Russell, that logic is not earthly.
You just granted me the law of non-contradiction. You can't backtrack now, Patrick. You're changing your mind.
No, I'm not changing my mind. I'm saying I agree with the law.
I said, will you grant the law of non-contradiction? You said
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now you're saying, well, maybe not.
No, I'm not saying well, maybe not. I'm saying I do grant it, but I'm not convinced it's necessarily an absolute. But I do grant it.
You just changed your mind.
But
because that's the only out you can find.
Nothing in law of non-contradiction says that it's an absolute. It's a rule of logic, but it doesn't.
Is that absolutely?
Eh?
Are you familiar with the principle of explosion?
Not particularly.
Aristotle came with this. Once you deny the law of non-contradiction, then all inquiry is gone, because once you say the law of non-contradiction doesn't hold, it also at the same time means it does hold. Every affirmation you say is both true and non-true, because there's no instrument for discerning it.
It's a false dichotomy. Aristotle wasn't perfect either. It's a false dichotomy.
Nobody questions the principle of explosion. It's true.
It doesn't matter.
This is why we're living in an age of idiocy where people make these stupid things like at the quantum level, logic breaks down. It's so stupid.
But it's not necessarily stupid. There are instances in our daily lives that defy logic all the time. Like law of non-contradiction. Here's a good one for the law of non-contradiction. You can say this is why there are paradoxes with no answer. Okay, like
a paradox is not a contradiction.
Like the
paradox is just something we don't understand.
Like the pile of sand paradox. There's no answer, right? So
Well, it's just that's just a question of categorization. It's not like a violation of law of non-contradiction.
Who says? I mean,
Me?
anybody? Yeah, you. Good for you. But I mean, I'm not.
I'm not asserting it. It's just a fact.
I'm not a Kantian.
It's not an opinion.
I don't think in terms of categories. It's nice. It's neat. But Kant was like that. He was very Germanic and very orderly, and so he liked to put everything in a slot. But you can't do that. Reality isn't like that. It's gray rather than black and white most of the time.
Okay, listen, Patrick, I got to get going. I got to get some work done.
Okay. All right.
But we can meet again if you'd like to.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Like, to me, this isn't over. I was just going to say where we can leave it off for the next time is where it's what I want to finish with. It's just to say, for me, I think clearly we as people we are contingent, but we can also be causes of things. And so this is where you say law of non-contradiction. You can't be an effect and a cause at the same time, but clearly we are effects.
It's a different relationship, though.
No,
it's not a violation of law of non-contradiction to be both a cause and an effect. We're saying a different relationship. I am an effect of my father, but I'm also a father myself. But those are different relationships. Okay. I am an effect of my parents, but I also cause teeth as I move matter around.
Right.
Those are different relationships. It's not a violation of logic.
Excellent. So then why can't you just apply that to the quantum level? That's all I'm saying. Like, if you apply that to the quantum
if you don't change your relationship, that's fine. But that's not a violation of law of non-contradiction.
Okay, I'm not saying it is. I'm saying, why can't you just take what we've just been saying about people and apply it to the quantum level?
That's my whole point. You don't need to say the violation of law of non-contradiction. It just says we don't understand it.
Okay, but I'm not saying anything's violated the law of non-contradiction. I'm just saying we can take that from our experience as people being both contingent and causes of things all the time and apply that
in different relationships, Patrick. It doesn't matter. Have you ever heard that?
I don't understand the disconnect here. I'm just saying we can take the same thing that we know as people and apply that to the quantum level.
I'm not sure what it has to do with this conversation, though.
It has lots to do with it, because then you don't need a self-existent cause and ultimate reality and all these other things that you've thrown in there. Because
you're saying the quantum level is God or something?
No, at the quantum level, the cosmic level, shall we say. At the level of quantum mechanics and things like that, like the basic physics of the universe, right?
Is there change at the quantum level?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
then it's not ultimate reality.
My model is the model that I've proposed here anyway. The model I've proposed here anyway is that it's essentially you don't have a kind of static godlike cause. You have a sequence of things going on to infinity past and infinity future, and none of these things are necessarily what you may call self-existent.
They're all dependent on nothing.
Changes.
They're all dependent on nothing. It's dependent existence instantiating independently, which is a law of identity. This was the law of non-contradiction. Something is dependent and independent at the same time in the same relationship. That's nonsense.
Okay, so that's not what I'm saying either. I'm saying if you're going to say self-existent, we'll go with that term. You could have a model of the universe or the universes or whatever we'll call it, the cosmos, okay, where you have this background or this, shall we say, original matter, shall we say.
Okay.
This is where
prime matter, Aristotle would call it.
Okay, original matter, whatever, where there's something about it, something material about it, that is the basis for everything else. Everything else is what you may call accidental, but that part of it is like the fundamental stuff, shall we say, fundamental matter. And that part is eternal, and everything else that results from it is accidental, if you will, if we're going to use Aristotelian terms. But what you're seeing here, I think, is that you don't have this self-existent spiritual entity that you're going to call God. But what you do have is a fundamental matter that is eternal.
Does the matter change, Patrick? You're saying matter is energy, right?
We can call it that.
And therefore, by definition, it changes.
Well, energy is neither
Created
nor destroyed, right? That's
But
energy.
it's changing.
So we don't say God, we say energy, right? It's neither.
Okay, so you're conceding the argument then.
Eh?
You're just calling God energy. That doesn't really work, but let's go ahead. You said it. You said that's the unchanging element. It's not true, but
yeah, I parroted the phrase that energy is neither created nor destroyed, and then I said we don't call that God, we call it energy. Right. So
okay, so you concede the argument that there must be something self-existent in order for contingent being to be? And we're just arguing over the name now.
Self-existent. Yes, okay. Fundamental matter, we'll call it self-existent, yeah. Okay, I'll concede that.
Okay, so now we're just arguing over the name. You have conceded the argument.
Yeah, I've conceded the argument, but I haven't conceded the conclusion that you were giving that you need it to be a god, right? At least that's what I understood your conclusion to be. I'm not saying.
Well, let's just call it Sally Struthers.
Sorry, what? I didn't understand.
You know who Sally Struthers is? You're
no.
probably too young. She was an actress. A poor lady always pick on her name. Just
I know
the
some
name.
Old actresses like Ingrid Bergman and stuff, but not her.
Yeah. She's from the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
She was in Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh gosh. Okay.
But anyway, it's just a joke for me. It's just like that's just a name that pops into my head. Whenever when somebody has a problem with the term, I'll just say, let's just call it Sally Struthers. You know, It doesn't really matter. The name doesn't matter. It's a word concept.
How about this? Is it okay if we call it fundamental matter or fundamental thing?
No, because matter is composite. This can't be. You can't have something that's composite. It must be simple.
Okay. Well, fundamental existence then. Whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Now, actually, if you want to be super, I can even parse that because existence comes from existere, which is X out of, standing out from, which necessarily denotes change because it had to stand out in order to be what it is. So it would just being. Okay. It would be fundamental being.
Fundamental being.
Yeah, there's no change in it. So existence is necessarily defining contingent being if you want to be super strict about it.
So let's say fundamental being for now then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I'm saying is okay, if I misunderstood your argument, please feel free to correct me and steel man it all you want. Okay. But I understood that you were saying essentially that you need creator, right? Like in the personal sense of the term, someone who creates something as the origin. Whereas for me, does personality and intention exist in the universe? Well, yeah, I mean that's pretty obvious, yeah. I mean on
okay, so how does it instantiate unintentionally?
Sorry, what's the question?
How did let's say you are an intentional being, right?
Yeah, like I have intentions, yeah.
Okay. Now, how did your intention instantiate means come into being unintentionally? Because unintentionality cannot be intentional. Again, a violation of law of identity. There must be something eternally intentional if there's intention here today. Again, modus ponens.
So I don't see why
intentionality requires an intentioner or personhood.
Because I don't see the logical problem in saying that through molecular reactions you can get this thing called consciousness and intentionality.
Okay, that's just a just so story. How do you get intentionality instantiating unintentionally? Don't tell me evolution's due it. That's not an answer.
No, I'm not. I don't believe in that anyway.
You believe in special creation?
I don't believe in Darwinian evolution.
What do you believe in?
I believe in each life form, to use your term, instantiating on it in its own origin. I don't believe in this.
So you don't believe in common descent?
No, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in the polygenic trees and all the other stuff that Darwinians have come up with, and genetic mutation over millions of years or hundreds of millions of years. I find
okay. Well, I need to get going here.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. So I mean, so for me, essentially, where we're at is, I understood you to be saying you need a personal creator, and I'm saying I don't see why you need a personal creator when you can have fundamental matter
that is impersonal, giving rise to you unimpersonally.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're violating law of identity.
I don't see why.
Because unintentional being cannot give rise to intentional being. Can rocks create philosophical societies?
No, but then again, neither can animals, and they have lots of intentionality.
Okay, but they are intentional beings, but not the same level as us. But you do realize, you do believe in this is Thomas Aquinas, the principle of proportionate causality. If something is going to cause something in something else, it must have at least in some degree the property that it is giving to something else, either virtually, immanently, or formally. In other words,
how does he demonstrate that? How does he?
Well, you don't believe that anything can cause anything, right? You don't believe that rocks can create philosophical theories.
No, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's basically what he's saying. That there's got to be some kind of correlation between causal relationships or causal agency. You can't have agency instantiating unintentionally.
So we have molecular stuff going on in the brain. So there's your link. I mean, there's no logical problem. You're saying intentionality, like non-intentional things can't make intentional things,
right?
But that is exactly what we do all the time. I mean,
no, that's what you've been told, and you haven't thought about it. And
but when we have babies and stuff, that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, sperm and ovum aren't intentional either, but they become.
Are you an intentional being? Are you an intentional being?
Yeah, you've already asked this.
So are you imparting intentionality to a baby?
Not at this very moment, no. But I mean,
but you do. That's how it works.
Right, but so you like sperm and ovum aren't intentional either.
They're human seed and a sperm and an egg.
But they're not intentional.
Well, they are. They are that which they do eminently have the capacity to give intentionality. That's what kind of beings they are.
See. So there we are. So I could say to you, because no, but as such, they're not intentional, and so you're violating the law of identity. So
they are the stuff of intentionality. Right. Doesn't mean they have to actually be intentional in the same way that we are. They have the capacity for intentionality.
Thank you. So exactly what I'm saying. Just you add more steps. You add more time, more steps.
I'm the one who's thinking simply. You're the one who's trying to add steps because you don't want to concede it.
I'm not trying to add anything. I'm just saying
it's Occam's razor to the opposite.
But Occam's razor isn't applicable here because all things aren't equal here in these instances. I'm talking about the cosmic level. You're talking about mere human biological reproduction. It's not exactly the same.
Which is a distinction without a difference.
It's not a distinction without a difference if you ask a physicist. It's by far not a distinction without a difference.
For the purposes of what we're talking about, it doesn't matter if it's big or small. Intentionality cannot instantiate unintentionally.
Well, clearly it does, biologically speaking. Right?
No, it doesn't. You're just repeating tropes. So you haven't thought of it yourself.
Okay, so, yes, I have. So then you're saying that God breathes the soul into the sperm and the ovum before they unite, or at conception? What do you say?
At conception would be my view.
Okay. So why? Does that mean that a zygote is conscious and intentional?
No, but it isn't a conscious and intentional being. In other words, it's not. It's an acorn is not an oak tree. Okay, in its fullest form, but it is an oak. It is an oak tree in its early form.
So a zygote to you has intentions.
No, it's an intentional being. It doesn't have. If you leave it alone, it will grow.
You're playing with words. You're playing with words. You're saying it's an intentional being because you're trying to skirt it. Because
that's what humans are.
Intentional.
Aren't humans intentional beings?
No, I'm talking about zygotes. Okay, so that's a specific
human zygotes. Human zygotes are humans, right?
Tough.
It's pretty simple to me.
They're human. I'll leave it at that. Okay. So I'll go with you halfway on that. But they're not intentional beings, and you know that, which is why
they are intentional beings. All human beings are intentional beings. That's what kind of being they are. That's how we categorize them.
Oh boy. Well, if you're going to say zygotes have intentions, then I can see why you're a theist.
I can say they're
I mean-
intentional beings.
Okay, but then you're playing with language.
No, I'm just being real. I'm just giving you science.
But it's not scientific to say zygotes have intentions.
It is scientific
not-
to say that zygotes are intentional beings, right?
No, it's not scientific. You're
So
saying
they're not human beings. And human beings are not intentional.
they're human. They're human.
Are humans intentional?
You're playing with words. You're trying to trap me with words here. And
I'm trying to get you to think for yourself. You've been brainwashed for years, my friend. I'm trying to help you out.
I went to Catholic schools for my entire upbringing. So
And you're not giving me Catholic dogma right now.
No, I'm not, because
you're trying desperately to wiggle out of it.
Because I've abandoned that dogma since. Zygotes are not intentional. I don't know what science book you found that in. It's not a scientific concept.
Yeah, so. Who would imagine that human embryos are humans?
They are human, yes, but
humans are intentional.
Where we start to say you're a human being, I think is up for debate. I would say at 8 weeks, but zygotes it's really, really tough for me to make a case to say they're a human at that point.
What kind of DNA do they have?
Oh, well, they have human DNA, that's for sure. But are they?
If I were to take a sampling of DNA from a immediately fertilized egg for a zygote, how would it look in comparison to your DNA?
Oh, well, it would look very similar, that's for sure. But they don't
exactly the same, other than the characteristic differences, right?
So what's your point?
It's a human at conception.
Yeah, but you can take.
It may not be sentient.
Okay, but
it is a sentient being.
Okay,
in other words, if you leave it alone, it will be.
You can swab my mouth and it'll have my DNA. So what? That's not a human.
But its DNA looks just like yours, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. My saliva, it doesn't. That's not another human.
But I know that you're human by that DNA, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying a thread of DNA is a human. I'm saying it is a marker of what kind of being it is.
Yeah. Well, we agree on that.
Yeah. So, anyway, my friend, I got to go.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Get some work done. But I can't tell you how enjoyable this has been for me, because I cannot find anybody who will even have a conversation. And if I do, they're incredibly stupid people. It's not nice of me to say, but the last couple of years, if you look at my videos, it's just like, oh my goodness, there's just no thoughtful. You're very thoughtful, and you're very honest having a conversation. I shouldn't say everybody's stupid. A lot of them are, and it's just like I kind of lose hope as last.
Have you ever discussed with Ben Crandall? Have you ever discussed?
Oh, look on my page. I've got 3 or 4 with Ben.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So how do you? I think I watched you debate or listened or whatever debate abortion with him, and or Darwinian evolution, or both.
I don't remember.
He's knowledgeable, but I think I think his reasoning is the problem. He has bad reasoning. Like he's not good at logic.
Do you know who Alex Malpass is?
No, I don't. Who's he?
He's a pretty well-known philosopher. He refuses to talk to me. I had an exchange with him once. But
is he an atheist?
Yeah.
Okay. No, Graham Oppie probably wouldn't refuse.
I'd be happy. Anybody that will have a conversation, I'm happy to have a conversation. The thing is, I'm not an educated guy, but the argument that you gave me at Graham Oppie was hilariously, it was just an aping of Kant's philosophy. He's fallen dead at Kant's feet, and we need to question Kant. He was wrong. He was an intelligent guy, but he was just wrong. And this is the key to success in the future.
Yeah, I'm not saying Graham Oppie's argument is perfect either. It's just one of the many one of the few, actually. I haven't actually seen a whole lot of arguments in favor of atheism. Most of them tend to be against theism rather than for atheism.
Well, I think the smart person is not going to be too dogmatic about making a negative claim.
Right, exactly. Which is why I'm not dogmatic about my atheism. It's like I don't believe. I'm not convinced in the existence of a God, and hence I don't believe in one. But does that mean that I'm right to not believe that? No. Does that mean that it's reasonable? No. There are all kinds of no's that come right after that. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Be too negatives.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Patrick, thank you very much for joining me.
I hope there'll be a part 2. Yeah, no problem. I hope there'll
We
be a
can.
part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Okay.
can talk about it.
We'll do it again. I enjoyed
Okay.
it very much. Thank you, Patrick.
Excellent.
All right.
Sounds good. I've enjoyed it too. Thank you. So have a great rest of the day or evening. And until next time.
Okay. You too. All right. We'll
Thank
see you, my friend.
you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.